yes, there have been a lot of calls. I've seen a lot of, I feel like statements in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I feel like a lot of acknowledgement of, injustices, whether it's like racism or like ableism in the field. And a lot of statements in solidarity with, Black, Indigenous, and artists of color as well. I guess what makes this worrisome for me is that like, I haven't seen a lot of language around, or a lot of language reflecting on like the organizational culture that then creates these conditions. So I'm definitely, if an organization is going to make a statement in solidarity, I kind of also want to hear what they're doing to look within their organizational context to shift that, beyond education, because I know a lot of folks are taking trainings and reading, maybe that's not where they are right now. I guess I also think, a lot of, or some dance nonprofits have emerged to make the work of a single founder sustainable. And so, if that's something that like an organization hopes to continue, but then they want to like add this other program, I question the logic of that. And so, that's one thing that I would suggest is, reflecting on whether your organization exists to sustain, your work, or if you're hoping to sustain the work of a more diverse community. And that's certainly a shift that I feel like is happening within HMD, where we're kind of navigating this transition of an organization that I presume was founded to like make your work more make it more sustainable for you to make artwork, and then kind of started slowly evolving towards a bigger vision. And then now is shifting to one where we're hoping that like the work of anyone who's involved in the organization is supported and sustained and can grow, and that there's exchange within that. So yeah, that's definitely one thing. Also, and transparency, just like financial transparency, and like I think any time that you can like show what money's coming in and where it's coming from and where it's going out, it gives you an opportunity to hold yourself accountable and like for other people to kind of understand what's happening in the organization. And I think even just seeing that like helps you think differently about like what you say and whether you mean it. So that feels really important as well, like in addition to these statements of like, this is what I want to happen. So yeah, I guess that's a start of an answer to this really large question.
Cherie, do you want to say anything, or I can go?
Sure. Yeah. I think that one of the best ways to support the Black Lives Matter movement is to support Black lives and to invest in Black communities and Black people, Black artists, Black youth. I think that some people have done that, organizations have done that as far as opening up space for Black artists to be able to present their work or to rehearse for free. Just highlighting more Black voices in media and magazines and in videos, things like that. I feel like, the more that you can support and invest in Black communities, the more that you are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. And then obviously, supporting policies that make the lives for Black people less oppressive and more safe is really important and critical as well. And then, all the people who have been on the front line during the pandemic, showing up at protests, showing up in front of police headquarters and just saying that things have to change, I think is also a way to support and has been very helpful. At HMD, I feel like some of the anti-racism work we've done has been a method to support the movement. We did have an anti-racism training and the Bridge Project, and then want to do more anti-racism trainings. And also, I think, you know, with our community engagement residency program, being able to give money to Black artists to then do work in the community is super crucial and helpful. And there have been Black artists and future Black artists that will be community engagement residency artists. So I see that also as a way of supporting the movement.
Yeah, I agree with everything you both just said. I've been thinking about what it means for a nonprofit to be accountable to a social movement as opposed to accountable to the board, which a nonprofit legally is. But I think a lot of times nonprofits get into this mindset where the organizational survival or organizational success, organizational financial well-being becomes the goal, as opposed to the nonprofit being accountable to a larger social movement. So I'm really interested in what that means to be so rooted in community that, you know, in our case, our community is artists. How can we be accountable to Black artists and artists of color? And I think we need to continue to do anti-racism trainings, and wondering what anti-racism in the arts looks like beyond education. You know, what is structural anti-racism? I think it has to mean white people stepping back, giving up power, sharing power, all of those conversations. Yeah.
With respect to power shift, that like, you know, if you want to like support Black artists, like just go see their work too. You know, like just be open to like seeing their work and being there, and not with the expectation that it's like going to comment, that it's going to be like the authority and like comment on these like larger structural issues, but just like go and appreciate it for like art and dance. I think if like it's part of centering Black voices and like non-white artists in these fields that have been where like whiteness is privileged, you know, and improvisation like with Power Shift is one of them. It's like, how do we center non-white voices without like recentering whiteness? Like looking at the ways that we don't want to inadvertently recenter whiteness by like saying that this is a program that's like specifically highlighting non-white voices or voices of color and Black artists and so forth. But just, yeah, I think, yeah, just like considering that like a lot of like these artists have been doing this work for a really long time, that their contributions like have always been there. It's just that you just chose not to notice, and like the structures exist so that like they also tried to support you not noticing them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's beyond trendy to have a solidarity statement. It's like, I'm just curious what will happen, you know, especially under a Biden administration when white people become more comfortable. You know, how I feel like over the past year, a lot of organizations have been performing solidarity, and I'm just wondering about like how do you get beyond the performance of solidarity? Like, just curious about what that's going to look like.
Or like, how do you get beyond this like assimilationist mindset of like, well, our organization is fine, like we just need to like get people up to like our level so that then like everything can be the same. Like it's not like that their organization is the problem or that like that organizational culture is the problem, but rather that like if everybody just had what we have, it would be fine. And you're just like, well, that's not true. Actually, like your organization is actually pretty harmful, like just in the way that it's like doing things and, you know, like potentially like, you know, perpetuates white supremacy culture and, you know, potentially tokenizes people. You know, like there's just so many things that I am really cynical about, but also hopeful about.
Yeah, I hope that the speaking out will continue. There's been a lot of speaking out about organizations and racism and inequities since the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter kind of heightened in the movement. And so we've seen that like with the situation at Give Me Dance Center and with California Arts Council and with Americans for the Arts and probably lots of other things. And I hope that that will continue, because I think it's really important for people to understand that there's organizations who have a lot of power and a lot of money that are really contributing to keeping white supremacy intact within the arts field, and that are not highlighting and acknowledging the contributions of Black artists and artists of color. So hopefully that speaking out and advocacy and unity of holding organizations accountable will continue till we really see some shifts.
Yeah.
And I think that will be really helpful.
Well, it's interesting to me to see some cases where, like, especially in big organizations, where clearly there are some folks in the organization who are pushing for change, and yet there are also forces in the organization that are continuing to hold on to the status quo, like that letter about the California Arts Council. And I don't know, maybe it's just a question of time. You know, over time, those people holding on to the status quo are going to fade away. I don't know. I'm just curious about the forces that, you know, kind of anchor the status quo inside a big organization. I don't know if it's, I feel like frequently, well, I don't know if the California Arts Council is not a nonprofit. I guess they're a government agency. In nonprofits, it seems like a lot of times the board of directors is like the last bastion. Like on the Izzy's, you know, it seems like there's a lot of the panelists, you know, that rotate in are frequently have been clamoring for change, but like the board of directors, it's like holding on to old patterns. It's curious to me how inside an organization there can be like forces, different forces.
Yeah, I feel like part of what I've noticed is this holding on to power can be really hard. Like, even if people within the organization have the intention of wanting to shift and change, really letting go of power so that that can happen because it's not happening with them is really difficult, I think. And then it's interesting organizations where people are just really stepping down, like they're stepping away completely. And I don't know if like the person that comes on will be able to really shift. Like I know there's been some turnover in local organizations, but yeah, it's there. From what I've heard, just like from some artists who work for organizations that are mostly white dominated and white led, which most nonprofits are, that they really just want people to give up their power, you know, because the shift internally to educate and to continue to call people out on the white supremacy and their actions, it's like tiring and it takes a long time. And they feel like people who are saying, white leaders who are saying like, yes, we're going to shift, we're going to bring in more equity, don't want to give up power in order to do that. They want to be the ones that stay in power as the equity comes in and the shift happens. So yeah, it's interesting. And for myself, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know if the right thing is to completely step away. Like, I'm not sure what that means either, you know? So yeah, it's interesting times we're watching, witnessing.
I think also in response to what you were just saying about people needing to shift away, one thing, just connecting this to distributed leadership that feels so important for me is that like, even if someone shifts away, right? Like I feel like I've lived my life kind of from the day to day in this like survival mode mentality. And so this idea of like being able to like envision a radical change when like I haven't even really thought about like what I'm going to do next month, or like I feel like I haven't like had that space or that luxury is really difficult. So yeah, in addition to like stepping away, this distributed leadership, at least within HMD for me, has like set up some conditions where like, because I can see the organization from all these different perspectives and like engage with all different parts of like the organization's community, whether it's like the board, like I feel like I have direct access to the board, I have direct access to like my staff colleagues. I mean, we're a small organization, but you know, with the artists, and now, you know, we're doing a lot more to like meet together with funders as a team. I feel like then that, you know, allows me to kind of break down some of those barriers that I feel like just like a life as a person of color in the US, like in a low income environment, has like created to just like visioning and like change in general. But not from, you know, the perspective of like wanting to uphold white supremacy, but just like trying to survive within like that being the structure. So yeah, I'm curious too about like with this stepping aside, like sometimes the cynical side of me thinks it's like an either or, where like it's either like people don't want to give up power or they just want to like peace out. And yeah, I'm happy that I'm happy that like within the organization we're kind of talking about this, and you know, understanding. But I don't, yeah, I just, yeah, I'm just curious about those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about, you know, when should I step away entirely? What feels good to me is that this process, it feels like a shared learning curve. So it's like if the time, I feel like as a group, we would come to a shared understanding of like, okay, now is the time, things are in place, capacity has been built, relationships have been fostered. That's what feels good to me, is that it feels like a learning process that we're all in together. And it would feel wrong for me to be like, okay, this is my decision, tomorrow I'm leaving, or whatever, whenever, pick a date on the calendar. Again, I think it goes back to relationships. It has to be like rooted in relationships.